The town woke up draped in grey and guilt. The ground still held the dew of the night, but in the hearts of the people, only hardness remained. Alana, pregnant and with tied wrists, was dragged to the sheriff's office. Her father spat words like poison, and the crowd watched with thirst for condemnation. Yet on her face, there were no tears, only a firm silence that hurt more than any scream. While the people raged, she stood tall. She begged for no mercy, asked for no explanation. Her swollen belly seemed protected by something invisible, perhaps faith, perhaps stubbornness, and even under insults and threats, what blossomed from her was strength. Colt, the sheriff, watched without saying a word. His gaze was cold as snow, but there was a hidden ember beneath it. Without a word, he led her to the cell and locked the door. The sound of metal echoed like a muted thunder. "Is this a prison?" she asked. He replied quietly, almost regretfully, "No, it's the only place where no one will kill you." And there, between worn walls and a thick silence, something unexpected began to grow. The following days were marked by silence and slow steps. Alana counted her baby's heartbeats, while Colt counted the hours with unlit cigarettes. He didn't approach, but he listened. She didn't speak, but she felt. It was as if their souls were speaking without words. And there, silence began to breathe between them. On a windy night, an old acquaintance arrived, a limping ex-soldier, leaning on a cane made from a broken bayonet. He brought bad news. Colt's former squad was back, and they wanted Alana. The child was born of forbidden love. The father, a deserter. And now, a living threat to wounds that never healed. During that visit, Colt revealed, in a low voice and with a naked soul, that his wife had been killed in the Sand Creek Massacre, a real atrocity in 1864, when soldiers invaded a peaceful native village and murdered women and children. That pain never left him. Now, the same ghosts were coming for another innocent, and he knew that this time, silence wouldn't be enough. Part 3. The child is born. The sheriff falls. The night the wind turned to storm, Alana began to scream, not in fear, but with life. The promised midwife never came. Lightning tore the sky, and the cell became the stage for an impossible birth. Colt entered, still broken inside, but with a heart finally beating strong. He helped as best he could, not knowing what to do, only knowing he couldn't leave. The birth was a battlefield. Alana clenched her teeth, the sheets, the bars. Colt held her hand, wiped her forehead, and prayed, even unsure if anyone was listening. Then she came, a baby girl, small, alive, screaming like a miracle in human form. She screamed like someone who refused to be silenced, but then Colt collapsed, blood on the floor, his body went limp, his face pale like a February snowfall. Alana, baby in arms, knelt by his side. "Come back to me," she cried, and it was the baby's cry that brought him back. He opened his eyes slowly, and with a weak voice said, "She screams loud." Alana smiled, exhausted, just like her mother. Part 4. The cell becomes a home. Time passed, but the cell was no longer a prison. Flowers graced the window, embroidered cloths hung on the walls, and a hammock cradled baby Lucia with old songs. Her name trembled on a white cloth sewn with hope. It was as if pain had been pushed into corners, making room for a peace born after the storm. Colt, still healing, slept outside to the sound of rain and baby laughter. He didn't dare enter, but every night he sat by the door, like a wounded guardian dog. He watched mother and child, feeling his once-locked heart thump again in his chest. A new sound, nearly forgotten, the sound of being alive. The town, once full of scorn, began leaving notes. First, an old woman brought a blanket. Then a boy came with drawings. One day, Colt found a flower planted at the sheriff's office entrance. He watered it. That night, for the first time, he stepped into the cell, not as a sheriff, but as a man. In his hands, he carried a rose. Part 5. They return. The night brought a strange silence, not peace, but threat. Horses marching in the distance, boots slicing through wet earth. They were back, the same soldiers, new uniforms, old hearts. They came with a warrant in hand and hatred in their eyes. They wanted Alana, they wanted Lucia, they wanted to silence what had bloomed behind bars. Colt heard them before he saw them, and he knew he couldn't run. He stocked the cell with supplies, barred the entrance with planks and iron, but more than that, he prepared the people, house by house, word by word. He called the town to protect what they once condemned, and one by one they came, with pots, shovels, prayers, and courage. At dawn, when the soldiers approached, they saw a wall of simple folks. Colt stood at the front, no weapons, but with memory. "She's not going anywhere," he said. The major pulled back, but before leaving, he warned, "This isn't over." Colt replied firmly, "No, this is where it starts." Part 6. The cell becomes a seed. The cell, once a place of punishment, now sprouted life. Lucia crawled across the floor, banging a spoon like conducting an invisible orchestra. Colt planted flowers in a makeshift garden outside. Some died in the cold night, others endured. Alana watched from the doorway with a serene smile, and her hand resting on another growing belly. He kept planting, even when the soil seemed stubborn. Alana asked, "Why insist on what won't grow?" Colt answered simply, "Because she believed they could." He didn't need to say who she was. It was his wife's memory, Alana's strength, the daughter who cried. It was the cycle completing. The silence between them now said everything. One calm morning, Alana called Colt inside. He stepped in slowly, like entering something sacred. He touched her belly, closed his eyes, and whispered, "Silence." But it was the kind of silence that carried heartbeats, a small, timid, persistent sound. It was life saying, "I'm here." Part 7. The cell becomes a legacy. Time moved forward with reverence. The second baby was born on a golden afternoon, as the whole town held its breath. A boy, Caleb, a name Alana chose to honor the man who stayed. Lucia held her brother's tiny hand as if recognizing a promise. The old cell was transformed. The bars were removed, but one was hung on the wall with a plaque. Here our home began. The space became a library, a prayer room, a corner for memories. There, Colt taught Lucia to read, telling stories that always ended with, "And then a miracle was born." One day, Lucia asked, "Mommy, was this a punishment?" Alana lifted her into her arms, looked into her eyes, and answered, "This was salvation." And in that moment, Colt realized they hadn't just built a refuge, they had planted a legacy, sown in silence, watered with pain, and harvested in love. Part 8. Where Roses Grow. Spring arrived with the scent of wet earth and promise. The rosebush Colt had planted months ago finally bloomed, shy but determined. Each petal carried a scar of history. Not all took root, but those that did grew strong. Like Lucia, now running through the garden, spreading laughter where once there was only silence. The town renamed the old sheriff's office Colt's House. A hand-carved wooden sign was hung above the door. Here, the law is love, and the cell became a beginning. People came from far away to visit, and they left changed, because something in Alana and Colt's story struck deep, like those soft songs that stay in your heart. Colt watched everything from his chair on the porch. Alana beside him, Caleb in her arms, Lucia drawing with chalk on the floorboards. He smiled. Not the wide, easy kind, but one that came from the soul, from someone who had known hell and still chose to plant a garden. Not all miracles come from heaven, he thought. Some rise from the earth, after the war. Conclusion. Soft, reflective narrator tone. Now I ask you, how many times in your life have you felt trapped in a place that seemed like the end, but was actually the beginning of something sacred? Maybe what hurts you today is exactly what will bloom tomorrow. Maybe the silence around you is preparing the ground for your miracle. If this story reminded you of someone, share it with them. If it moved you, leave a comment. Tell me, what part touched your heart the most? And if you, like me, believe that love can transform even the coldest of cells, subscribe to Between Heaven and History, hit the notification bell, and stay with us. Because here, every story has a root, and yours might be the next to bloom.